Guys, can I just say a massive thank you to each and every one of you amazing legends that absolutely smashed that subscribe button and helped us get to 20,000 subscribers. That's 20,000 of you legends who are part of the Wideawakehorror family. Let's continue this run and see how many more of us we can get together. So, if you're listening and you haven't yet subscribed, please join us and hit the sub button. It's free and will really help support us. Don't forget to hit the like button too if you've subbed. Thank you again.
You know how they say you gotta kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince? Well, let me tell you about the time I kissed a frog that turned into a straight-up monster. So there I was scrolling through Tinder on a boring Tuesday night when I stumbled across this guy named Kane. His profile was nothing special, the usual gym selfies and a pic with a dog that probably wasn't even his. But something about his smile caught my eye, so I swiped right. We matched almost instantly, and before I knew it, we were deep in conversation. Kane seemed pretty cool at first. He was funny, asked good questions, and didn't immediately try to steer the convo towards hookup territory. After a few days of back and forth, he asked me out for coffee. I figured why not? It's just coffee, right? Little did I know I was about to step into a real-life horror movie. We met up at this cute little cafe downtown. I was a bit nervous, but Kane put me at ease right away. He was even cuter in person, with these big brown eyes and a killer smile. We ended up talking for hours about everything from our favorite movies to our most embarrassing childhood memories. The conversation flowed so easily, and I found myself laughing at his jokes and feeling totally comfortable. By the time we left the cafe, I was already thinking about seeing him again. Kane must have been on the same wavelength because he asked if I'd like to go to the movies with him next weekend. I said yes without hesitation, already imagining the cute Instagram posts we'd make together. Fast forward to our second date. We're at this old school cinema that shows classic films. Kane picked some noir movie from the 50s, which I was actually pretty excited about. We grabbed some popcorn and found our seats in the back row. As we settled in, I couldn't help but feel a little flutter in my stomach. This was going so well, I thought. The movie started, and it was pretty good, but I couldn't help noticing how Kane kept glancing at me out of the corner of his eye. At first, I thought it was kind of cute, but then he started shifting in his seat, moving closer to me. I started to feel a little uncomfortable, and I tried to focus on the film. About halfway through the movie, Kane put his arm around me. Okay, no big deal, I thought. But then he started leaning in, and I could tell he was going for a kiss. I wasn't ready for that, so I quickly turned my head and pretended to be super invested in the movie. Kane didn't take the hint. He kept trying to catch my eye, and his hand started rubbing my shoulder in a way that made my skin crawl. I was getting more and more tense, but I didn't want to make a scene in the middle of the theater. I tried to subtly shift away, but he just moved closer. As the movie went on, Kane's behavior got more and more aggressive. He started whispering in my ear, telling me how beautiful I was and how much he wanted to kiss me. His breath was hot on my neck, and I could smell the popcorn and soda on his breath. I was trapped between him and the armrest, feeling more claustrophobic by the second. I kept my eyes glued to the screen, praying for the movie to end. Every minute felt like an hour. Kane's hand started to wander, moving from my shoulder down my arm. I tensed up, hoping he'd get the message, but he just gripped my arm tighter. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the credits started rolling. I practically jumped out of my seat, mumbling something about needing the bathroom. I rushed out of the theater, my heart pounding. I splashed some cold water on my face in the restroom, trying to calm down. When I came out, Kane was waiting for me with a weird smile on his face. He suggested we grab a drink, but I made up some excuse about having an early morning. He walked me to my car, and I could tell he was going to try for a goodnight kiss. I quickly opened my car door and said goodbye before he could make a move. As I drove home, I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. Something about Kane's behavior in the cinema just felt off, like he wasn't respecting my boundaries at all. I decided to trust my gut and block his number as soon as I got home. The next day, I woke up to a bunch of notifications. Kane had somehow found my Instagram and Facebook, and he'd been messaging me nonstop. He was asking why I wasn't responding to his texts, saying he thought we had a connection, and that I owed him an explanation. Now I was starting to freak out a little. How did he find my social media so quickly? I didn't remember telling him my last name or anything. I blocked him on all platforms and tried to put it out of my mind. A few days passed, and I was starting to feel better about the whole thing. Maybe I'd overreacted, I thought. But then I got a message request on Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. It was Kane using a different profile. He was saying he just wanted to talk, that he didn't understand why I was ignoring him. At this point, I was seriously creeped out. I blocked this new account and set all my profiles to private. I even Googled how to make sure someone can't find you online, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Kane wasn't going to give up so easily. A week went by and I was starting to relax. I hadn't heard anything from Kane and I was hoping he'd finally gotten the message. But then one night, I was walking to my car after work, and I swore I saw someone who looked like Kane across the street. He was just standing there staring in my direction. I quickly got in my car and locked the doors, my heart racing. As I drove home, I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Kane following me. I took a few random turns just to be sure. When I finally got home, I ran inside and double-checked all the locks. For the next few weeks, I was constantly on edge. I changed up my routines, always looking over my shoulder. I even considered moving to a new apartment. But slowly, as time passed with no sign of Kane, I started to feel safer. It's been a few months now, and I haven't seen or heard from Kane since that night I thought I saw him outside my work. I still get a little nervous sometimes when I'm not alone, but for the most part, life has gone back to normal. I'm just glad the whole thing is over, and I can finally put it behind me. Alright, so picture this. It's a chilly Friday night, and I'm curled up on my couch, mindlessly swiping through Tinder. I'm about to call it quits when suddenly this guy's profile pops up. His name's Pete, and let me tell you, he's drop dead gorgeous. I'm talking jawline, dark, and handsome with a side of bad boy vibes. Before I can even think twice, my thumb's hitting that like button faster than you can say catfish. To my surprise, we match instantly. Pete's first message is smooth as hell, asking about the band tee I'm wearing in one of my pics. We start chatting, and it's like we've known each other forever. We're both into indie rock, true crime podcasts, and had an unhealthy obsession with spicy food. The conversation flows so easily, I don't even realize I've been texting him for hours until I see the sun peeking through my curtains. Fast forward a week, and Pete asks me out. We decide to meet at this quirky little coffee shop downtown. I spent way too long getting ready, changing my outfit about 1,000,000 times before settling on a casual but cute look. When I get to the coffee shop, my heart's pounding so hard I swear everyone can hear it. I spot Pete at a table near the back, and holy crap, he's even hotter in person. He stands up when he sees me, flashing this killer smile that makes my knees go weak. We order our drinks and start chatting, and it's like no time has passed at all. Pete's funny, charming, and he's got this way of making me feel like I'm the only person in the room. After coffee, we take a walk in the park nearby. It's a perfect autumn day, leaves crunching under our feet as we stroll along. Pete reaches out and takes my hand, and I swear I can feel sparks flying. We end up sitting on a bench, watching the sunset, and when Pete leans in for a kiss, it's like fireworks going off. Over the next few weeks, Pete and I are practically inseparable. He surprises me with little gifts, takes me on amazing dates, and always knows just what to say to make me smile. I'm falling hard and fast, and I can't believe my luck in finding such an amazing guy. But then things start to get a bit weird. Pete begins asking a lot of questions about my family, especially my mom. At first, I think he's just being interested in my life, but the questions get more and more specific. He wants to know about her job, her schedule, even her finances. It's starting to make me feel a bit uncomfortable, but I brush it off, thinking I'm just being paranoid. One night, we're cuddling on my couch watching a movie when Pete drops a bombshell. He starts talking about how he's in some financial trouble and needs help. I feel bad for him, but I'm a broke college student myself, so I don't know how I can help. That's when Pete suggests something that makes my blood run cold. He wants me to borrow some money from my mom. I'm shocked and tell him I can't do that, but Pete doesn't let it go. Over the next few days, he keeps bringing it up, trying to convince me. He says things like, "Your mom won't even notice," or "It's just a little bit of money." I'm starting to feel really uneasy, but I'm so into Pete that I don't want him to believe he's serious. Then one day, Pete shows up at my place unannounced. He looks stressed and says he really needs the money. He even offers to come with me to my mom's house to help me get it. That's when it hits me. This guy is bad news. I tell Pete to leave and that I won't steal from my mom. He gets angry, yelling and calling me names. I'm scared, but I stand my ground. Finally, he storms out, slamming the door behind him. I think that's the end of it, but boy, am I wrong. Pete starts blowing up my phone with texts and calls. Some are apologetic, others are threatening. He says he knows where I live and where my mom works. I'm freaking out, not knowing what to do. After a sleepless night, I decide to tell my mom everything. She's upset, but mostly worried about me. We go to the police and file a report. They take it seriously, especially when they find out Pete has a record of similar scams. I jump at every little noise, constantly looking over my shoulder. My mom insists I stay with her for a while, which I'm grateful for. We even install a security system, just to be safe. One night, about a month after everything went down, I'm at my mom's place when we hear a noise outside. My heart starts racing, and I'm sure it's Pete. My mom calls the police while I hide in the bathroom, shitting like a leaf. When the cops arrive, they find signs of someone trying to break in, but no Pete. This close call is the last straw for me. I decided to take a semester off from college and stay with my aunt in another state. It's not ideal, but I need to feel safe again. Before I leave, the police assure me they're still looking for Pete and will let me know if they find anything. The next few months are tough. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows. I start seeing a therapist to help deal with the anxiety and trust issues I've developed. Slowly but surely, I start to feel more like myself again. When I finally return home, things are different. I'm more cautious, more aware of my surroundings. I've learned the hard way that not everyone is who they seem to be online. The police never caught Pete, but they think he's moved on to his next victim. It's been a year since that nightmare. I'm finally starting to feel normal again. I've gone back to college, made new friends, and even started a part-time job. I still have moments where I get scared, thinking I see Pete in a crowd or hear his voice, but they're getting less frequent. As for dating, well, let's just say I'm taking a break from that for a while. When I do decide to get back out there, you can bet I'll be a lot more careful. No more falling head over heels for a pretty face and smooth talk. And Tinder. Yeah, that app is definitely deleted for good. I can't believe I'm actually writing this down, but I guess I need to get it off my chest somehow. It's a perfect summer day, the kind you dream about all year. I'm standing in front of my mirror, trying to get my hair just right, and my heart's racing like crazy. Why? Because today's the day. A 1-year anniversary with Julia, and I'm about to pop the question. Little did I know this day was gonna turn into a total nightmare. So I had this whole thing planned for weeks, right? I'm talking the works. Fancy picnic, romantic spot in the park. And the ring? Man, that ring. I spent months saving up for it, picking out the perfect one that I knew Julia would love. I was so sure she was gonna say yes. We've been talking about our future, even looking at apartments together. Everything seemed perfect. I pull up to Julia's place and she comes out looking absolutely stunning. She's wearing this flowy sundress that I love, and her smile, it just lights up everything around her. We hop in the car and we're both buzzing with excitement. Julia keeps asking where we're going, but I'm keeping it a surprise. The whole drive we're laughing, singing along to our favorite songs, and I'm thinking to myself, this is it. This is the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with. We get to the park, and I lead her to this secluded spot I found earlier in the week. It's perfect. There's this big oak tree providing shade, and you can see the lake in the distance. I lay out the picnic blanket and start unpacking all the food I prepared. I even remembered to bring her favorite wine. For the next couple of hours, we're just chilling, eating, and talking about everything and nothing. Julia's telling me about this crazy thing that happened at work, and I'm hanging on every word. I'm also getting more and more nervous as time goes on. My hands are shaking a bit as I pour the wine, and I keep checking my pocket to make sure the ring is still there. The sun starts to set, and I know it's time. I'm about to reach for the ring when Julia's phone buzzes. No big deal, right? Except I happen to glance at the screen, and that's when I see it. Jake with a pink love heart next to his name flashing on her notifications. My stomach drops. Now, I'm not usually the jealous type, but something about this just feels off. I mean, who's Jake? And why does he have a heart next to his name? I try to play it cool and casually ask Julia about it. She gets this look on her face, kind of like a deer caught in headlights. She stammers something about him being a coworker, but I can tell she's lying. Her cheeks are flushed, and she won't meet my eyes. That's when I know something's up. I press her a bit more, and that's when it all comes tumbling out. Turns out, Julia's been seeing this Jake guy for months. Months. While I've been planning this proposal, picking out rings, and dreaming about our future, she's been sneaking around with someone else. I feel like I've been punched in the gut. All the air leaves my lungs, and for a second, I think I might actually be sick. Julia's crying now, saying she never meant for it to happen, that she was confused and didn't know what she wanted. But honestly, I can barely hear her over the roaring in my ears. I start thinking back over the past few months, trying to spot the signs I must have missed. All those times she said she was working late or hanging out with friends, was she with him? How many lies has she told me? How could I have been so blind? I can't even look at her anymore. The picnic, the ring in my pocket, the whole perfect day. It all seems like some kind of cruel joke now. Without really thinking about it, I start packing up the picnic stuff. Julie is still talking, still crying, but I'm on autopilot. Once everything's packed, I just leave. I know it's probably a jerk move to leave her there in the park, but I can't stand to be around her for another second. I need to get away to clear my head, to try and make sense of what just happened. I don't remember stopping at lights or turning corners. I just find myself sitting in my driveway, staring at nothing. The ring box is digging into my leg, a constant reminder of what could have been. I stumble into my apartment and collapse on the couch. My phone is blowing up with messages and missed calls from Julia, but I can't bring myself to look at them. What would I even say? The next few days pass in a haze. I call in sick to work, ignore all my messages, and barely leave the couch. I can't eat, can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see Julia's face, hear her confession playing on repeat in my head. Julia keeps trying to contact me. She shows up at my place a couple of times, but I don't answer the door. I just can't face her yet. The pain is too raw, too fresh. After about a week, I finally drag myself out of the apartment. I meet up with my best friend at a bar, and he listens as I spill the whole story. He's shocked. Everyone thought Julia and I were the perfect couple. Guess we all got fooled. As the weeks go by, I start to come out of my funk of it. I go back to work, start hanging out with friends again. But there's still this hollow feeling in my chest. I keep catching myself thinking about Julia, wondering what I did wrong, if there was something I could have done differently. The hardest part is getting rid of all the reminders of her. Her toothbrush in my bathroom, her favorite mug in my kitchen, the framed photos of us scattered around my apartment. Each one is like a knife to the heart. And then there's the ring. I can't bring myself to return it yet. It sits in my dresser drawer, this constant reminder of what almost was. Sometimes late at night, I take it out and look at it, wondering what would have happened if I'd never seen that text message. It's been about a month now since that day in the park. I'm doing better, I guess, taking it one day at a time. But I'd be lying if I said I was over it. The truth is, I still love Julia, or at least I love who I thought she was. It's messed up, I know. She cheated on me, broke quite hard. And yet there's still this part of me that misses her. I know eventually I'll move on. I'll meet someone new, fall in love again. But right now, that feels impossible. For now, I'm just trying to get through each day, learning to be okay on my own again. So yeah, that's my story. Not exactly the happy ending I was hoping for, but I guess that's life for you. Always full of surprises and not always the good kind. Alright, so you're not gonna believe the wild ride I just went on. Seriously, if someone had told me this morning that my Friday night would end with sirens, handcuffs, and a police interrogation, I would have laughed in their face. But here I am, still rattled and trying to make sense of the craziest date of my life. It all kicked off when I matched with this guy, Jamal, on Tinder. His profile seemed normal enough, cute pics, witty bio, the works. We chatted for a few days, and he came across as funny and charming. So when he suggested meeting up for drinks, I thought, why not? We agreed to meet at this trendy bar downtown called the Rusty Nail. I got there a little early, snagged a table, and ordered a drink to calm my nerves. When Jamal walked in, I'll admit my heart did a little flip. He was even more attractive in person. Tall, athletic, with these warm brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. We hit it off right away, laughing and swapping stories. Jamal was full of energy, gesturing wildly as he told me about his job in freelance logistics, whatever that meant, and his love for extreme sports. I was totally captivated, hanging on his every word. After a couple of hours and a few drinks, Jamal suggested we go for a walk to clear our heads. It was a beautiful night, so I agreed. We strolled down the street, window shopping and people watching. Jamal kept his hand on the small of my back, and I was feeling pretty giddy about how well the date was going. That's when things started to get weird. Jamal said he needed to stop at an ATM, which seemed innocent enough. But as we approached the machine, I noticed him getting twitchy. He kept looking over his shoulder and fidgeting with his phone. I figured maybe he was just nervous about using an ATM at night, but something felt off. Suddenly, Jamal's phone buzzed. He checked it, then made a quick call. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his whole demeanor changed. He went from relaxed and flirty to tense and businesslike in seconds. Before I could ask what was up, this guy on a motorcycle came zooming up to us. He was wearing all black with a helmet that covered his face. Jamal greeted him like an old friend, which set off all kinds of alarm bells in my head. The motorcycle guy handed Jamal a backpack. They exchanged a few words I couldn't quite catch. Then the guy sped off as quickly as he'd arrived. I stood there, mouth hanging open, trying to figure out what the hell I'd just witnessed. Jamal turned back to me with this big fake smile and suggested we head back to the bar. My stomach was in knots, but I didn't want to make a scene. So I nodded, and we started walking. As we went, I noticed Jamal kept looking over his shoulder every few seconds. My heart was pounding, and I was desperately trying to come up with an excuse to end the date early. That's when I heard sirens in the distance. At first, I thought it was just typical city noise, but the sound kept getting louder and closer. Suddenly, police cars came screeching around the corner from every direction. They surrounded us, lights flashing and sirens blaring. Everything after that happened in a blur. Officers jumped out of their cars, guns drawn, shouting at us to get on the ground. I was frozen in shock, but Jamal immediately dropped to his knees, hands in the air. As they handcuffed Jamal, I heard one of the officers mention something about a robbery. My brain was struggling to catch up with what was happening. I just sat there on the sidewalk, watching in disbelief as they searched Jamal in the backpack. When they opened the bag, I caught a glimpse of stacks of cash and what looked like jewelry. It was like a scene from a movie, except I was living it. The realization that I'd somehow ended up on a date with a criminal hit me like a ton of bricks. The police started questioning me, and I babbled like an idiot, tripping over my words as I tried to explain that this was just a first date, and I had no idea what was going on. Luckily, they seemed to believe me pretty quickly. I guess my shocked expression and shaking hands were pretty convincing. They took Jamal away in a police car, and I had to stay behind to give a statement. I answered what felt like a million questions, going over every detail of the night. The officers explained that Jamal and his accomplice had robbed a jewelry store earlier that day, and our date was just a cover for him to pick up the stolen goods. By the time I finally got home, it was nearly 4 a.m. My head was spinning, trying to process everything that had happened. I kept replaying the night in my mind, looking for signs I might have missed. For a split second, I hoped it had all been a crazy dream. But nope, reality came crashing back as soon as I checked my phone. I had a missed call from the police station and about a million texts from friends who'd somehow already heard what happened. I spent the day in a daze, alternating between answering concerned calls from family and friends and obsessively Googling Jamal's name. Turns out this wasn't his first rodeo. He had a whole history of similar crimes, using dating apps to find unwitting covers for his heists. The more I learned, the more I felt like an idiot. How had I not picked up on any red flags? Sure, there were a few things that seemed off, like how vague he was about his job, or how he kept checking his phone during dinner. But in the moment, I'd brushed them off as first date jitters. As the day wore on, my emotions were all over the place. One minute I'd be angry at Jamal for using me, the next I'd be laughing at the absurdity of it all. Then I'd swing back to feeling scared about what could have happened if things had gone differently. My friends kept trying to cheer me up, saying things like, "At least you got a great story now." But honestly, I wasn't sure how I felt about being known as a girl who accidentally dated a jewel thief. By Sunday night, the shock had mostly worn off, replaced by a weird mix of embarrassment and relief. On one hand, I felt like a total fool for falling for Jamal's act. But on the other hand, I was just grateful that I hadn't gotten more caught up in his scheme. As I got ready for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat when I read it. "Sorry about the other night. You seem cool. Rain check on that second date." I stared at the screen in disbelief. Was Jamal seriously trying to flirt with me from jail? Without hesitating, I blocked the number and deleted my Tinder account. Some lessons you only need to learn once, and I definitely had my fill of bad boys for a while. It's a Friday night, and I'm getting ready for what I thought was gonna be the date of my dreams. Little did I know I was about to step into a fast food nightmare that would haunt my dating life for years to come. It all started when I matched with this guy, let's call him Mark, on one of those trendy dating apps. You know the type, all smiles and charm in his profile pics, bio full of witty one-liners and impressive-sounding hobbies. We hit it off pretty quickly, chatting about everything from our favorite movies to our dream vacations. After a week of non-stop texting, Mark suggested we meet up for dinner. He was all mysterious about it, saying he had the perfect place in mind and wanted to surprise me. Now, I'm usually pretty cautious about first dates, but something about Mark's confidence made me throw caution to the wind. Big mistake. Huge. So there I was, Friday evening, primping and preening like my life depended on it. I pulled out all the stops, my favorite little black dress, those killer heels that make my legs look amazing but absolutely destroy my feet, and even broke out the fancy perfume I save for special occasions. I was ready for a night of fine dining and sparkling conversation. Mark said he'd pick me up at 7, and right on the dot, I heard a car horn outside. I peeked out the window, expecting to see some sleek ride befitting a finance guy. Instead, I saw a beat-up old sedan that looked like it had been through a demolition derby. But hey, I'm not one to judge a book by its cover, right? I hopped in, trying not to wrinkle my dress on the torn upholstery. Mark greeted me with a big smile and a "you look great," before peeling away from the curb. As we drove, he kept hyping up this restaurant, talking about how exclusive it was and how lucky we were to get a table. I was intrigued, wondering what kind of hidden gem he'd discovered. We chatted as we drove, and I noticed we were heading into a part of town I wasn't too familiar with. Then, just as I was about to ask where exactly we were going, I saw it. Those golden arches glowing like a beacon in the night. At first, I thought we were just passing by. But nope, Mark turned into the parking lot with a flourish, like he was pulling up to a 5-star restaurant. I sat there, stunned, as he parked the car and turned to me with his proud grin. "We're here," he announced, as if he just revealed the 8th wonder of the world. I waited for the punchline, the "just kidding," anything to indicate this was a joke. But nope, he was dead serious. In a daze, I followed him into the McDonald's. And let me tell you, if there was ever a McDonald's that could be described as grimy, this was it. The floor was sticky, the lights were flickering, and there was a smell I couldn't quite identify, but definitely didn't want to. Mark strode up to the counter like he owned the place. And then, I kid you not, he ordered 5 Big Macs. For himself. I was still in such shock that I barely managed to squeak out an order for small fries. As the cashier rang us up, Mark turned to me with an expectant look. That's when I realized he wanted me to pay for his 5 Big Macs at McDonald's on our first date. I was so flabbergasted that I just handed over my card without thinking. I mean, what else could I do at that point? As we waited for our so-called gourmet meal, Mark kept going on about how exclusive this place was, how we were so lucky to get in. I looked around at the screaming kids, the overflowing trash cans, and the couple arguing in the corner, wondering I'd accidentally stepped into some bizarre parallel universe. We got our food and sat down at a sticky table. Mark immediately dug into his Big Macs, talking with his mouth full about the exquisite cuisine and ambience. I picked at my fries, trying to figure out if this was some elaborate prank. But it got even better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. Mark finished his mountain of Big Macs in record time, then suggested we take a romantic stroll through the play area. Yes, that germ-infested jungle gym where kids run wild. That was his idea of romance. Before I could come up with an excuse, he was already climbing into the ball pit. A grown man in a ball pit on a first date. I stood there in a nice dress and heels, watching him roll around in a sea of plastic balls and probably years of accumulated germs, wondering how my life had come to this point. As if that wasn't enough, Mark then decided to try out the slide. Picture a full-grown adult man, stuffed into a tiny plastic tube, inching his way down while making whooshing noises. Kids were staring, parents were glaring, and I was seriously considering changing my name and moving to another country. But wait, there's more. After extricating himself from the slide, which took a good 5 minutes and involved a lot of grunting, Mark decided we needed dessert. He marched back to the counter and ordered one of every type of McFlurry they had. And guess who we expected to pay? Yep, yours truly. As we sat there, surrounded by melting ice cream and the judgmental stares of other patrons, Mark launched into a speech about how this was the best first date he'd ever been on. How he felt such a connection with me. How he couldn't wait to see where this relationship would go. I sat there, nodding and smiling, while internally I was screaming. How had this happened? How had I ended up here, in a McDonald's play area, with a man-child covered in ball pit grime and McFlurry residue on what was supposed to be a fancy first date. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I managed to make up some emergency involving my non-existent cat, as I was calling an Uber, because there was no way I was getting back in his car. Mark had the audacity to ask when we could do this again. Like, seriously, did he genuinely think this had gone well? I mumbled something non-committal and practically ran out of there, leaving behind the remnants of my dignity and any faith I had left in online dating. As I waited for my Uber, I could see Mark through the window, happily playing in the ball pit again, completely oblivious to the disaster that had just unfolded. The Uber ride home was a blur of disbelief and hysterical laughter. I mean, what else can you do in a situation like that? By the time I got home, I already decided this was going straight into my never tell anyone about this fault. But of course, that lasted about 5 minutes before I was texting all my friends with the unbelievable tale. And that's the story of my McDonald's date from hell. Needless to say, I didn't see Mark again, although he did text me a few times asking for a second date. I deleted the app, took a long shower to wash off the lingering smell of fries and regret, and swore off dating for a good long while. So, I matched with this guy Marvin on Tinder about 2 weeks ago. His profile seemed normal enough. We hit it off chatting, bonding over our shared love of indie rock and true crime podcasts. After a few days of back and forth, we decided to meet up for dinner. I spent way too long getting ready, trying on like 5 different outfits before settling on my favorite jeans and a cute top. I was actually kind of excited, you know. It had been a while since I'd clicked with someone online like this. I got to the restaurant a few minutes early and snagged a table near the back. When Marvin walked in, I felt a little flutter of nerves. He was even cuter in person. Tall, dark hair, nice smile. He was wearing a button-down shirt and jeans, looking put together but not trying too hard. At first, everything seemed great. We ordered some appetizers to share and fell into easy conversation. Marvin was charming and funny, cracking jokes and asking me all about my job and hobbies. Maybe he was a little too interested in the details of my life, but I chalked it up to first date enthusiasm. As we moved on to our main course, I started to notice some slightly odd behavior. Marvin kept inching his chair closer to mine, to the point where our knees were almost touching. He'd reach out and touch my arm or hand when making a point, which felt a bit forward for a first meeting. But I tried to brush it off, not wanting to seem uptight. After dinner, Marvin suggested we grab a drink at the speakeasy-style bar nearby. I was having a good time, so I agreed. The bar had a cool, intimate vibe with dim lighting and vintage decor. We found a cozy booth in the corner and ordered some fancy cocktails. That's when things started to get really uncomfortable. Marvin slid into the booth right next to me, practically pinning me against the wall. He draped his arm over my shoulders, pulling me close. I tried to subtly create some distance, but he wasn't taking the hint. He started getting really intense, telling me how beautiful I was and how he felt like we had an amazing connection. Mind you, we'd known each other for all of 3 hours at this point. I was starting to feel seriously creeped out, so I made an excuse about having an early meeting and said we should call it a night. Marvin looked disappointed but agreed. As we left the bar, he asked if he could walk me home. I lived pretty close to downtown, so I stupidly said okay. Big mistake. The whole walk back, Marvin kept trying to hold my hand or put his arm around my waist. I kept dodging him, but he was persistent. My heart was racing, and I was mentally kidding myself for not just calling an Uber. When we got to my building, I thanked him for the evening and went to say goodbye. But instead of leaving, he asked if he could come up to my apartment for a nightcap. I politely declined, saying I was tired and had to get to bed. That's when things got really scary. Marvin's whole demeanor changed in an instant. His face hardened and his eyes got this cold, angry look. He started insisting that I let him come up, saying he'd come all this way and I owed him. I was getting seriously freaked out at this point. I told him firmly that I wasn't comfortable with that and he needed to leave, but he wouldn't budge. I tried to walk past him to the building entrance, but he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. I yanked my arm away and told him to back off, but he just got more aggressive. He started yelling about how I was a tease and had led him on all night. I was absolutely terrified. The street was deserted, and I had no idea what this guy might do. My mind was racing trying to figure out how to get away safely. Should I scream? Try to run? I was fumbling in my purse for my phone, thinking maybe I could call for help, when Marvin suddenly lunged forward and tried to grab my keys. In that moment, pure adrenaline took over. I shoved in as hard as I could and yelled at the top of my lungs for help. Marvin stumbled back, looking shocked. I think he wasn't expecting me to fight back like that. Just then, like some kind of miracle, a couple of my neighbors came walking up the street. They must have heard me yell because they immediately rushed over, asking if everything was okay. Marvin backed off real quick when he realized he had an audience. I was shaking so bad I could barely speak, but I managed to tell my neighbors that this guy wouldn't leave me alone. They immediately positioned themselves between me and Marvin, telling him in no uncertain terms that he needed to leave right now. Marvin tried to play off like it was just a misunderstanding, but my neighbors weren't buying it. One of them, this big burly guy named Mike who lives on the first floor, got right up in Marvin's face and told him if he ever saw him around here again, he'd call the cops. Finally, Marvin slunk off into the night. Mike and his wife, Sarah, waited with me until I was safely inside my apartment. They even offered to call the police, but at that point, I just wanted the night to be over. Once I was alone in my apartment, the full weight of what had happened hit me. I burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably as I double-checked all the locks and even pushed a chair in front of the door for good measure. I barely slept that night, jumping at every little noise. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marvin's angry face. The next day, I've had a bunch of texts from him acting like nothing had happened, saying what a great time he had and asking when we could go out again. I blocked his number immediately and reported him on Tinder. It's been a couple weeks now, and I'm still pretty shaken up about the whole thing. I keep replaying it in my head, thinking about all the red flags I missed and how differently things could have gone if my neighbors hadn't shown up when they did. I've told this story to a few of my friends, and it's scary how many of them have had similar experiences. It really makes you realize how careful you have to be when meeting strangers online. I come across this girl named Janet. She's cute, got a nice smile, and her bio seems pretty cool. We match, start chatting, and things are going pretty smooth. We got some common interests. She's making me laugh, and I'm thinking, hey, this might actually work out. After a couple days of texting back and forth, Janet suggests we meet up for coffee. I'm down for it, feeling pretty excited about my first date in months. We agree to meet at this cozy little cafe downtown on Saturday afternoon. Saturday rolls around, and I'm a bundle of nerves. I get to the cafe early, grab a table, and wait. Janet walks in, and I'm pleasantly surprised. She looks even better than her profile pics, which is a relief because, let's be real, that doesn't always happen. We order our drinks and start chatting. At first, everything's cool. We're talking about our jobs, our favorite movies, that kind of stuff. Janet's a nurse, and she's got some wild stories about the ER. I'm laughing she's laughing, and I'm thinking this might be the start of something good. But then things start to get a little intense. Janet starts asking me these really personal questions, like not just what's your favorite color kind of stuff, but how many kids do you want, and what's your ideal wedding type questions. I try to laugh it off, thinking maybe she's just nervous and oversharing, but she keeps pushing. I'm starting to feel a bit uncomfortable, but I don't want to be rude. I try to steer the conversation back to safer topics, but Janet's not having it. She's got this look in her eyes like she's on a mission or something. As we're finishing our coffee, Janet suddenly reaches across the table and grabs my hand. I'm thinking, okay, this is moving a bit fast, but maybe she's just affectionate. But then she drops the bomb. She looks me dead in the eye and asks me to marry her, right there, in the cafe, on our first date. For a second, I think she's joking. I mean, who proposed on the first date, right? But nope, she's dead serious. She's going on about how she feels this connection between us and how we're meant to be together. I'm sitting there, coffee cup halfway to my mouth, completely stunned. I try to let her down gently. I mean, we've known each other for all of an hour in person. I tell her I'm flattered, but it's way too soon to be thinking about marriage. That's when things go from weird to straight up scary. Janet's face just changes. It's like a switch flipped. 1 second she's all lovey-dovey, the next she's furious. She starts yelling at me, saying I let her on and wasted her time. People in the cafe are staring at us, and I can feel my face turning red. I try to calm her down, but it only makes things worse. She grabs her coffee cup and throws it at me. I duck, and it shatters against the wall behind me. Coffee's dripping down the wall, and I'm just sitting there shocked. At this point, I'm genuinely scared. I've never seen anyone flip out like this before, especially not on a first date. I stand up to leave, but Janet blocks my path. She's screaming about how we're meant to be together and that she won't let me go. The cafe owner comes over to try and help, but Janet shoves him away. She's like a woman possessed, her eyes wild and her hair all messed up. I'm looking around for an escape route, my heart pounding in my chest. I manage to sidestep her and make a break for the door. As I'm running out onto the street, I can hear her behind me. She's yelling that she'll find me and make me pay for rejecting her. I don't look back, just keep running until I'm sure I've lost her. When I finally stop to catch my breath, I realize my hands are shaking. I can't believe what just happened. It was like something out of a horror movie, but it was real life. My life. I spend the next few days jumping at every sound and looking over my shoulder constantly. I'm terrified that Janet will show up at my work or my apartment. I even consider changing my phone number and deleting all my social media accounts. I keep replaying the date in my head, trying to figure out if I missed any red flags. Was there something I should have noticed? Some sign that Janet was unstable, but I can't think of anything. She seemed so normal at first. A week goes by and I haven't heard from Janet. I start to relax a little, thinking maybe the worst is over. But then I get a text from an unknown number. It's Janet. She's apologizing for her behavior, saying she was just overwhelmed by her feelings for me. She wants to meet up again to explain herself. I'm torn. Part of me is curious to hear her explanation, but a bigger part is screaming, no way. In the end, common sense wins out. I block the number without replying. For the next month, I'm on edge. I take different routes to work. I avoid the cafe where we had our date. I even ask a friend to check my apartment before I go in, just in case. It's exhausting, living in constant fear like that. Gradually, things start to get back to normal. I don't see or hear from Janet again. But the experience leaves a mark. I'm way more cautious about online dating now. I always meet in public places. I let friends know where I'm going. I trust my gut if something feels off. Looking back, it's still hard to believe it all happened. One minute I'm on a normal first date. The next I'm running for my life from a coffee-throwing, marriage-obsessed stranger. It's the kind of story that, if it wasn't so terrifying at the time, would be almost funny. So yeah, that's my crazy dating story. It's not exactly a fun memory, but it's definitely one I'll never forget. And hey, at least it makes for a good story at parties. Just maybe not on first dates. Don't want to scare off any potential matches, you know. I'm sitting in the fanciest restaurant I've ever been to, wearing a dress that cost way too much, and staring at an empty chair where my date should be. Sounds like the start of a bad rom-com, right? Well, buckle up, because what happened next was anything but romantic or comedic. It all kicked off when I matched with this guy, Harry, on a dating app. You know how it goes: swipe, match, chat, repeat. But Harry seemed different. He was funny, charming, and actually asked questions about my life instead of just sending shirtless gym selfies. After a week of back and forth, he suggested we meet up for dinner. Now, I'm usually more of a casual first date kind of girl. Give me a coffee shop or a low-key bar any day. But Harry insisted on this upscale place downtown, saying he wanted to make a good impression. I figured, why not? It'd be nice to get dressed up for once. The day of the date arrives, and I'm a ball of nerves. I spent hours getting ready, trying on every outfit I owned before settling on a new black dress I'd bought for the occasion. I even watch a YouTube tutorial to figure out how to do a smoky eye. By the time I'm done, I barely recognize myself in the mirror. I get to the restaurant a few minutes early, and holy cow, this place is fancy. I'm talking crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and more forks than I know what to do with. The hostess leads me to a table with a view of the city skyline, and I'm feeling pretty good about the whole thing. Harry shows up about 10 minutes late, looking a bit flustered. He's wearing a nice suit, but his tie is slightly crooked, and there's a faint sheen of sweat on his forehead. He apologizes for being late, blaming it on traffic, and sits down across from me. At first, things seem okay. We're making small talk, looking over the menu, which, by the way, doesn't even have prices listed. Yikes. And I'm starting to relax a bit. But then I notice something odd. Harry keeps glancing around the restaurant, his eyes darting from table to table like he's looking for someone. I try to brush it off, thinking maybe he's just nervous. We order our drinks, a glass of red wine for me, a whiskey for him, and continue chatting. But as the minutes tick by, Harry's behavior gets weirder and weirder. He's barely making eye contact with me, his leg is bouncing under the table, and his answers to my questions are getting shorter and more distracted. By the time the waiter comes to take our order, I'm feeling pretty uncomfortable. I go for the salmon, figuring it's a safe choice. Harry, on the other hand, orders the most expensive steak on the menu, plus a couple of fancy-sounding appetizers. I raise an eyebrow at this, but he just gives me a tight smile and says he's really hungry. As we're waiting for our food, Harry excuses himself to use the restroom. I'm left sitting there, fiddling with my napkin and wondering if I should just call it quits and leave. But then I think maybe he's just having an off night. I decide to give him the benefit of the doubt. 5 minutes pass, then 10. I'm starting to get worried. Did he fall in? Should I ask someone to check on him? Just as I'm about to flag down a waiter, I hear a commotion from the other side of the restaurant. And there's Harry sprinting through the dining room like he's trying to qualify for the Olympics. He's weaving between tables, knocking over chairs, and causing absolute chaos. People are gasping, plates are clattering, and I'm just sitting there, mouth agape, watching this disaster unfold. For a split second, I consider chasing after him. But then I remember I'm wearing 4-inch heels and a dress tighter than Raph. There's no way I'm catching up to him, and honestly, do I even want to? So I'm left there, feeling like a complete idiot with the entire restaurant staring at me. The manager rushes over, looking concerned, and asks if I'm okay. I manage to stammer out that I'm fine, just totally blindsided. As I'm trying to explain the situation to the manager, this older couple at a nearby table waves me over. The woman looks at me with this mix of pity and amusement and drops a bombshell. Apparently, Harry is their son's roommate, and he's been bragging about running out of dates to avoid paying the bill. I kid you not, my jaw nearly hits the floor. This guy had been pulling this stunt for months, using dating apps to score free meals at fancy restaurants. He'd chat when online, suggest an expensive place for dinner, order the precious stuff on the menu, and then bolt as soon as he got the chance. At this point, I'm feeling a whole roller coaster of emotions, embarrassed, angry, and weirdly relieved that it wasn't something I had done to make him run off. The couple offers to cover my part of the bill, but I can't let them do that. I end up paying for both our meals, including Harry's barely touched steak and those fancy appetizers, and leaving a big tip for the waiter who had to deal with all this drama. As I'm gathering my things to leave, still in a state of shock, my phone buzzes. It's a notification from the dating app. Harry has unmatched me. The audacity of this guy, I swear. I stumble out of the restaurant, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. The cool night air hits me, and I finally let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I flag down a taxi, climb in, and give the driver my address. As we're driving through the city, I replay the whole night in my head. Were there signs I missed? Red flags I ignored. But honestly, up until he made a break for it, Harry had seemed totally normal. It just goes to show you never really know who you're meeting online. I get home and immediately kick off those torture devices masquerading as shoes. I wipe off my makeup, peel off that too tight dress, and put on my comfiest pajamas. As I'm settling onto my couch with a pint of ice cream, because if any situation calls for stress eating, it's this one, my phone starts blowing up. It's my best friend, Kate. Apparently, the story of Harry's great escape has already made its way to social media. Someone at the restaurant had filmed the whole thing and posted it online. The video is going viral, and people are calling it the dine and dash date disaster. I spend the next hour on the phone with Kate, recounting every excruciating detail of the evening. She's equal parts outraged on my behalf and amused by the sheer absurdity of it all. By the time we hang up, I'm feeling a little better. At least I got a good story out of it, right? As for Harry, I never heard from him again. I like to imagine he's out there somewhere, still running from restaurant to restaurant, leaving a trail of confused dates and unpaid bills in his wake. But who knows? Maybe the video is a wake-up call and he's turned over a new leaf. Me, I'm sticking to coffee shops and casual bars for first dates from now on. No more fancy restaurants until I'm sure my date isn't going to pull a Houdini on me, and you can bet I'll be keeping a closer eye on the exits.
Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.